Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's episode, we are lucky to be joined by RayClark. Ray is a recurring guest of multiple times now. We're not even sure how many times he's been on. He's been on a few different times, but Ray is the Director of Training and Development for Truck Country and Stoops Freightliner, a really, really good friend of mine located not too terribly far from us across the border into Iowa. But how's everything, Ray?
It's beautiful. The change of seasons, I want to say we're going to stay clear of the hot weather, but it sounds like the end of the week's supposed to like get up into the 80s. But hey, I can live with that as long as we're not tornado or hurricanes.
Yes, yes, and thinking about everybody kind of going through all of that right now, a lot of interesting weather out there currently as we record this. But
Yeah.
how are things at Truck Country and Stoops in terms of the training side of things? You guys are always pushing the envelope of the latest and greatest, and the expansion continues.
Yeah. Actually, on that forefront, our location in Dubuque, Iowa, and I'll apologize if you hear some banging around a little bit. We've got some building going on, so we're going to add a couple classrooms up above. We've taken on more of the building itself, so we're looking at 30,000 square feet of training center here. Um, one, two, six, eight, probably 10 bays, at
Wow.
least 2 and 3 deep. We've got 5 in-house trainers, a couple traveling trainers, as far as our dealership world goes. But yeah, the truck country side's got some huge expansion going on with the facility and building. So that'll bump us up to about 7 solid classrooms and a lot of bay space for us. And did the same over with Stoops. We added another couple classrooms on and an engine lab. So it was really nice to expand on both sides of things to kind of give some of the trainers a little more freedom and room to actually progress. And I think overall, us as a company, it gives those employees that better feel as they come into the training center too, that it gives them more room and they're not on top of each other with different classes. So yeah, a lot of growth going on.
So let's talk about the schools themselves. And I know we've covered this in past episodes, but walk us through what it looks like for a student. Are they're coming in very similar to a tech school student, if you will, or give us an idea what all does the school encapsulate here in terms of training?
Yeah, so the training centers are employee based training programs so that if you do get hired on, we got a various like 4 different programs from an engine program. If they come out of a UTI program from Finish First, if they come out of a tech school program, if they come straight from a high school program, lots of ways they can really get paid training. So what we do, we have an apprentice certified apprenticeship program where they get employed and they sign an agreement with us and they kind of literally, I don't want people to think of it being a high school or fresh out of high school program, because we've got guys. My son's actually in the program and he's the youngest when he started at 18, and the oldest is, I believe, at 52 with a career change in there. So the programs to get into them are really, based on just getting employed with one of our dealerships and then coming into the training center. But the cool thing that we do when you talk school, Jay, that here in Dubuque, we've partnered up with 3 local high schools and the Dubuque district, and the kids are coming in, juniors and seniors, and taking an accredited uh, program with us through the local college, so that when they get said and done, they'll have dual credits. I believe it's up to 7 now. And then all they got to do is go back into NICC and take the academic side of things. So that's really the one of the cool things, is now getting more involved in with the high schools themselves.
It's been really, really impressive to see this. How many students are we talking here? How many students are in the facilities at any given time?
Currently, right now, we've got 3 classes going on. we're upwards of 5 classes, and that's including the high school class. And size wise, with Freightliner Detroit, those classes are kind of limited to 8 technicians. Our apprenticeship programs at 10. High school's really been like quite a bouncing ball, man. We started out with the world on fire, like 16, 18 students all wanting to come in, and it's bounced back and forth anywhere from 12 to 10. Currently, we got this year's class is kind of small. We're sitting at 5 tech students in the tech program.
Any reason why that varies so much? Because I don't think it's just your program, right? I think we see that all over the place where one year you can't get a spot as a student and next year there's an abundance of spots, and there's no rhyme or reason as to why.
Yeah, and it's funny and coincidental at the same time because we also do a Boy Scout Explorer program, which happens to be tonight. And that one is the same way, Jay. It literally has been like 12, 14 students from various high schools all around the county here. And literally tonight we're going to hopefully see 4 students. So I talked to that, like it's marketed, it's put out there in advance, even to the point where I believe the Boy Scouts had a grant, so they were able to lower the enrollment fees. And it still has not, like, I question that. Like, how are we not filling these skilled trades jobs? We've got tons to offer. We market it. We talk about employment opportunities. We talk about pay scales, how good it is, and how it keeps going up and up and up. But I often wonder, like, are we getting into schools early enough to give them that door opportunity to open that door and see what we have to offer? Are we waiting? Those are some of the things I think that I don't think they have a planned path yet, right? Even as a senior, my son was a senior, and I don't think he was completely locked in solid. I think I remember even myself, it was kind of a given path for me a little bit. But when you talk to these college students, even when they're in college, I don't think they're solid on, yeah, I'm going to do this and stay with it at the 4 year.
I will say, I think your son had a very similar path in that. I don't know. So just so you know, or the folks that are listening know, Ray's son is named Diesel. There's not a whole lot of other paths you're going to go with that name.
Yeah, kind of.
You're destined for it.
Yeah, kind of helped him steer that, right?
Still one of my top 5 names, I think, of all time. I absolutely love that name. I think it's so cool. And it's really cool to see him enter the industry. I'd be curious at some point, maybe we should have him on to talk about it, because I'm always fascinated by what his generation is thinking, how our industry is perceived amongst them. Is it still that kind of grease monkey mentality of the outside perception of how the outside world sees us? Or has it changed as much as we think? Because I think a lot of us in the industry think we've started to see that. But then when you see the difficulties in getting enrollment in not only your school, but a lot of schools throughout the U.S., there's a high level of concern there still. I still don't know that we've landed the point, regardless of how much effort we've put into it.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things still to this day. I mean, you and I have kind of been fighting this fight for I don't know how many years now. And
A long time.
yeah, in both our podcasts, we both have been speaking about this. And like you and I've had conversation in the past. How soon is too soon to get into schools? How do we get a different portrayal of the grease monkey, the dirty job type scenario? All the way to the fact where I've like used the gamer effect and use that analogy, and people try to get an eye opener of that and stuff. So it is I think a vast majority of them still think that it's a hard type living. I don't know how we can get it out there enough to show that it pays very well, and that it's not as bad as it seems in the work side of as harsh as it is, or they think it is, right?
Is there some reality to it, though, in that I've been a proponent of really being able to explain the good side of the business, but there still are techs that have dirt under their fingernails and have oil on their pants or on their shirt. And I think a lot of times we go in to these programs and we talk about how clean it's gotten. Yet if you walk through a lot of diesel shops throughout the US and really automotive as well, there still is some level of dirtiness. There is still some level of it's hard work, and at times when we're up against other industries that somebody can sit behind a computer and it's a climate controlled room, and there's just, I do think some things that we have to be honest with as well. Although it is moving to a more clean environment, it is moving to more of that lab look in a lot of shops, but there's still a lot of shops throughout the US that are still have their share of oil and still have that kind of that grimy shop look. And I do think when somebody walks in, maybe they don't, it doesn't add up, or it doesn't seem parallel to a lot of what we say. And I've always tried to, really get my hands around this of like, how do you sell the industry without overselling it, if that makes sense?
Right. So we just went to over in Elizabeth to CTE, and there's a bunch of schools that came in, and they were all sophomores for the most part. And I pretty much promoted it the same way, Jay, is that I used a little bit of analogy with technology and computers with the gamers and stuff. I said, but there are still that heavy mechanical that needs to be done. There's still the PM services that are going to get dirty. So it's you can't go out promoting it and sugarcoat it that it's all painted white floors and white glove type scenario, because it's not. By no means I don't want that promoted, but the biggest thing that I would think, and it can be as simple as a brake job, it's the satisfaction that you just completed something that some people cannot do. It's the satisfaction of when you're going up and down the road in your own local interstate highways, county roads, and you look over and the truck passes, or you pass that truck, and it's like, oh, I'm the guy that kept that on the road, right? Or got it back on the road. It's looking in the farmer's field and seeing those trucks bring in the crop, knowing that, hey, I got them back on the road, back in the field like yesterday, and there they are getting, my French fries at McDonald's will be ready for me in time.
Well, as you're saying this, I'm wearing one of our WrenchWay shirts that says "Fix what others can't," and I do think there's a lot of value in that pride. And I think being able to get a young person to have the patience enough to learn everything, to know that there is a learning curve. This is not easy stuff to work on, but it can be hugely rewarding. And at some level, I almost feel like we should be selling the lifestyle, right? Or really, like, I look to farmers, for example, right? And farmers, that's certainly not the highest paying job out there, but those people love it. Like it's in their blood. That's how they work, and that's how they live. And, I think you hit on a really excellent point in that, I think a lot of what we do goes over and above a paycheck. Like there are some pretty cool things that we do. And regardless of if you have dirty hands or not, like you're doing some really cool stuff.
That the one thing, and I'm sure you've seen it, where it says, dirty hands, clean money.
Love that. Yes.
And that's really the biggest thing that some of these guys, I think, the pride, the satisfaction of fixing that stuff. Like I said, especially in today's technology, as you know, I mean, okay, so everybody's concept is, oh, I can hook up a laptop and diagnose the truck. It tells me what's wrong with it. No, you're still going to be up and down on a creeper. You're going to be taking some stuff apart. You're going to be doing some diagnostics via hands, visual, measuring voltages, looking at stuff, and knowing, oh, this is a fail component, or, the big promotional thing that I do when we talk on the technical side. And hey, what do I need in school, is doing math. Like, everybody thinks that, back in the day is like, oh, you don't need to know much how to fix a truck. Well, I beg your pardon, but there's a lot that you need to know, and math is huge in the high schools. That I try to keep pushing that they need to keep that on the forefront.
Yeah. And I think somehow if they can come up with math that is applicable to what we're doing or what to a carpenter is doing or anybody in construction, right? This math is important to all of these trades. And I've heard more and more high schools going to that model where they are doing math that is applicable to what it is that they're going to use, right? Because I
Yeah.
think, I look back to when I was a kid and going through algebra class and just thinking in the back of my head, like, when am I ever going to use this? Right. But if it was geometry, completely different thing, because I loved race cars and loved racing, and
Yep.
geometry kind of like that hit home with me for whatever reason. So when I look at it, I just would love to see schools adopt a program where the math is more related to the things they're actually going to do on top of general life skills, right? Like budgeting and just like the math. Sometimes I think we try to overcomplicate math, and in reality, in our industry anyway, and I've talked to a lot of schools about this, that they want to get into advanced level diagnostics in high school, and I said, let's take a step back for a second. Can we read a tape measure first and foremost?
Exactly.
like that's the math that we could really use, is that base level of math in general.
Well, even to your point with geometry, right? And it's like, how does geometry relate with the trucking? Okay, let's talk driveline angles and suspension angles. Again, measuring with a tape measure. So yeah, that's a good way to just kind of back to the basics, and then you think, in our earlier conversation, you got to think of when is too early or too soon, right? Like,
Right.
I've had people laugh at me because I don't want to say it in a bad way, but in a good way. They've kind of chuckled of like, you're visiting sixth grade students. And I'm like, yeah, I am. Like, if you don't have a door to open or a picture for them to see or a vision for them to think about, well, that's too early. They're going to forget about it. I'm not talking like one and done. I'm talking like, you go back
Building
in seventh
relationships.
grade, you go back in eighth grade, you go back in ninth grade, and if you stay in front of them and you have some programs like the Boy Scout, I mean, there are some very successful stories that we have. We've had, I know for a fact, we've had a young student go through the Explorer program into the high school program, and he's now hired with us. So it's like, the ones that really want it will keep seeking it out. But again, if you don't, it's like anything. If you don't know, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, as they say, right? Like, I mean, if I didn't know the color brown until I saw it, I wouldn't know it's brown or red or purple, right? I mean, I don't know how to put a different analogy to it, not sound too weird, but opening the doors and staying in the front of the kids' faces, I think, is the biggest thing we got to keep doing. And again, you don't have to paint the pretty picture. You have to tell them, from start to finish what it can and can't be. I mean, yeah, you're going to come in and you're going to probably push a broom. I don't care if that's an auto shop or a diesel shop. You're going to push a broom from time to time. I as a manager, still push a broom and have no problem with it, right? But the success, when you look at it and start talking with some of these counselors, and I think there's another roadblock there for a side conversation maybe during this podcast. But when you look and go to dealerships, go to the employee parking lots and see what these, I'll call them young employees, are driving for vehicles. I mean, then go into, we've had discussions with some of our employees that are in their mid 20s. They're buying a house in mid 20s and successfully succeeding with their career path and living on their own. Like, I get it that, there's other job opportunities out there that can pay, but man, to be a diesel technician in the mid 20s, own your own house, own a very nice vehicle, own probably 40,000 plus just in a basic tool set to get started out at, it's, that's something to be proud of.
It is. And I think that's part of the cool part too, right? You hear a lot of people will talk about, well, it's crazy that you make your technicians buy the tools, and at some level, I think that might be changing a little bit with the younger crowd. Like maybe there's a little bit more desire to have tools supplied for them. But I know I've talked to so many technicians over the years that don't want that taken away from them. They like buying their own tools and like having, uh, what they need at their disposal. And so I caution shops from just jumping on that train, which I think most probably would be okay with, just because it is really, really expensive to provide tools for
Right.
technicians. But maybe coming up with programs or incentives to be able to help them pay for those tools, I think is a really effective way to kind of make everybody happy. But it is funny because I think you'll hear complaints from both sides, right? You'll hear complaints
Right.
from some techs that are like, why do we have to buy our own tools? Plumbers and electricians, they don't have to buy anything, or at least not nearly as much as what we have to. But
Yeah.
then you hear from other techs that are like, don't touch my tools, I want my own tools.
Yep. And that you say that and add in the plumbers and contractors, of course, with the building and construction we got going on. I kind of asked the lead construction guy, the carpenter here, and 90% of what came off his company truck was his own. And it was a lot of Milwaukee cordless type tools and stuff like that. And that was his own for that same reason, because I want what I want and I know it's mine.
Shout out to our friends at Milwaukee Tool.
Yeah.
They were just on a podcast of ours and have sponsored our Voice of Technician survey. They're just phenomenal people that make phenomenal tools. And so as you're saying that, I'm like, I got to get them in
Yeah,
there
there's
because
a
they're
plug for him.
so
Yeah.
good to us. Yeah, they're so good to
Yep.
us. But going back to your initial point of how early you start talking to them, I think at some element we need to shift our thinking here a little bit from just strictly recruiting to relationship building, right? And you're actually working to build relationships with that sixth or seventh grader, which sounds really, really weird or odd, but it is. I mean, that could carry somebody through to actually come through to our industry.
Yep.
And the more exposure we get them, the more times we can get them to come into our shop and see what it's really like and meet the people in our industry, because there are so many great people in this business to be able to help mentor that young person and really to spark that interest with that young person that might really make that leap into this industry, into this career field. And I think, excuse me, at times we look at that as like an extra step or something that we don't need to do. But in reality, if you can go out and build relationships with these kids over time, that's going to become a fruitful relationship. And it might not even be just that kid. It might be, hey, we impacted a class to grow in size, and now we've put out more people into this industry. And I think where you're headed, or what you've been doing over the past few years, is really connecting with these young people, growing programs so that there are more people to come into this industry. And at the end of the day, just building relationships with the students and instructors that can become something at some point down the road.
Yeah, and you know yourself, the camaraderie within a shop is it becomes a family. I mean, our apprenticeship program, like I said, is a 3-year program, and they come from all the different locations. So 15 different locations across Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. But when these groups start up, they sit amongst themselves. They don't know each other, and they're all like kind of shy and standoffish, right? And I tell them, I said, by the time you guys come in here in the second week, you'll all have nicknames for each other, and you'll be like your own little family. And what's really cool is that when we graduate that class out, we bring the new class in, and so they get to see the graduation. And they emphasize it, like the 3 years goes by so quick, but then they see that camaraderie of fellow workers from different locations all getting along, joking with each other. So it is, you're exactly right. So even internally with a relationship, how do you as a employee start to build a relationship? So, and I've heard this, and I know you've heard this, a lot of the instructors at the high school level, like they're getting bombarded when it's time for graduation, right? Like I don't want to see or hear from you. And I'm not, trust me, I'm not preaching anything, because I know I need to get in a lot of schools as much as I possibly can myself. But I don't always go knocking on the door when it's just time for, hiring and stuff at graduation time. I try to get in there as much as possible throughout the year and stuff. And I think that's disheartening for the instructors in the schools sometimes, that it's like, okay, we hear you talking, and the only time we see is when you want somebody right then and now. So just getting in there to say hello, it's like, I don't, sometimes when I visit NICC, it's like I just want to walk through the door and just kind of walk around and hang out for the day, right? Or half a day with the students and the instructor and stuff like that.
That's hugely impactful too, Ray, right? Like just going and hanging out, visiting with the class. I know so many instructors love that when somebody from industry just comes in and hangs out with their class, maybe brings a box of donuts or two over with them or buys them lunch. And, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but to those students, that's pretty cool when somebody that's got a reputation in the industry stops in to check in and say hi and see what's going on in their class. And honestly, even just trying to get an understanding of what the students are doing in the class. I just think there's so much value in that we underestimate. And I get that everybody's busy. It is really, really hard to carve out time and go visit a school, but put it on your calendar. Just do it once a quarter or twice a year or something, to where, you can build on that relationship. Because I think a lot of times what you'll learn, and this as well as anybody, Ray, but like once you get your foot in the door and you start talking to that school and you start building that relationship to the point to where they almost expect you to be in maybe once a month, or, at least to come in and say hi, it builds a different type of relationship than just the always asking for something relationship.
Yep. And if it's local, it's funny because, I go to as many truck shows as possible, and you see the same students, kids, going through there. You know who the gearheads are, right? And to me, it's really cool because they make it a point of going up and saying hello to you. Like they recognize you, so that's the other thing, right? Is like you said, that just that relationship and getting out there and doing some things.
Technicians, have you checked out WrenchWay yet? WrenchWay is a free online community for automotive and diesel professionals. Whether you're looking for a job or not, WrenchWay makes it easy to explore new opportunities, stay up to date on what's going on in the automotive and diesel communities in your area, and helps improve and promote the technician profession. Check out all of the job details you care about before you apply or interview with WrenchWay Top Shops. Details like photos of the shop and answers to the questions you actually care about, instead of the same old copy and paste job description you see everywhere else. Open to new job opportunities but don't want to apply yet? Create an anonymous reverse job post and let shops reach out to you, and see what's going on with the industry in your area through WrenchWay's Shop Talk. Join the WrenchWay online community for free by visiting wrenchway.com or by downloading the WrenchWay mobile app. Link is in the show notes.
I wanted to circle back on the counselor thing, because that's kind of been, through the last few years, it seems like we fight the fight with the counselors and we promote it and do everything we can. But I feel like they still are like, oh no, you have to go to a 4-year school. Like to be successful, some of them really think that, no, you should really go to a 4-year school. Well, how do you fight that fight? Like, I'm not gonna load somebody's pocket with goodies in a counselor perspective. And I don't know if that's happened. I mean, I have heard that some larger colleges literally pad pockets to get enrollment coming to theirs. And it's like, man, it's somewhat of an ugly society that we've kind of go through in different times, where like it's no more about the education, it's more about a financial business aspect. And it's like we got to get back to, we need to educate our people, and it's everything from a skilled trades to a doctor and a lawyer, but just don't do it to get numbers.
Yeah. And if it truly is about the kids, being able to cater to those kids and those students to the way that's going to make them the most productive adult. And I have heard even, locally here at our local school district, now actions sometimes maybe don't match what they're saying, which is also frustrating from the superintendent standpoint, from the school board standpoint. It's easy to say that you love the trades and that you want to support the education of students in the skilled trades, but when it comes down to it, I think the actions speak much louder than words. And there are frustrations from my end, not just locally, but across the nation. And we just got a note from a school in the Northeast, again, as last week or 2 weeks ago, where they were on our school assist program. We had a shop that was trying to help them out through that. And they reached out to us and said, "Hey, thank you for the offers, but unfortunately we're closing our doors because of lack of student interest." And for me, that's such a killer, because had we known, or had industry known a little bit more, we could have gotten more involved. But when it gets to that point to where they've had the discussion as a school board, I mean, the decision's already been made at that point, and anything we try to do after that is going to be really, really difficult to try and right the ship. So we need to somehow get a better path to communication with these schools. We're seeing that's been the cool part that I see from our school assist product, is just being able to get that pulse of those schools to make sure that, hey, if this is even on the agenda to talk about, if this is something where the dean at a tech school started to maybe mention things, or superintendent of a high school is starting to talk about their concern over lack of enrollment or lack of interest in the program, that we as an industry need to go in guns a-blazing and really, really do whatever we can to help save those programs. Because if we don't, we think we're in tough shape right now. I mean, wait if those go away.
Quicker, better communication. I mean, it's almost, again, I talk about the business thing. It's like a business model that if you don't communicate soon enough, quick enough, or point blank enough in general, and then it fails, you can't fix it. Yeah, that's kind of disheartening for me here, and it's like you said, in the Northeast, and it's like then you hear a school closed down because of lack of enrollment. It's like, okay, so what was the hurdle as far as lack? Was it not enough marketing? How do you keep that interest going in areas that is that low? I mean, we all need the skilled trades, whether it's a diesel tech, a auto tech, a plumber, or electrical. It's again, we've been talking about this for years, and it's
beat your head against the wall, right?
Yeah, it's like that lump you want to swallow down, and it won't go.
I look at it though, and then I'm going to throw this scenario out at you, because you are connecting with middle schoolers where a lot of people aren't. If you do a really good job at connecting with that sixth grader, then the seventh grader, the eighth grader, and you are working to ultimately create a feeder system to that high school program, I can't help but think that that's going to have a really positive impact. And hopefully it drives that student interest to where they don't have a choice but to keep the program, right? Like I think that's our obligation as an industry, is what can we do to work together to fill these programs up so that is never on the table. And granted, not every school is going to have every student interested in our industry. I totally get that. But the ones that are interested and we don't do a good enough job reaching out to, shame on us, because we're putting ourselves in this predicament to start with.
Yeah, I will tell you, I do want to give a shout out to David Moeller in the Dubuque School District, because he has really been on the forefront with me and the company here, Truck Country, to push this high school program and keep their smaller automotive type programs as a feeder type into the diesel side of things. Again, it goes back to that communication piece, because you definitely got to push it and talk about it. So, and you got to have that one or two people at the school level that wants to keep it going. I think that's the biggest thing. And if you're a company and if you have the opportunity, the size or the capacity, then you know what? Reach out to the school themselves, because I've heard a lot of, and I'm sure you have, where the auto programs or the wood shop or those mechanical type in school classes or courses are going away. Then you know what? Provide an instructor and an area for them if you can, right? And see if the kids could, you know, bus them to your location if possible, if you're not far away. Or say maybe I know Dubuque at one time was looking for an instructor for a long time. You know what? Yeah, it's going to hurt, but could you take 3 days a week and take one of, even a solid tech, right? A senior tech that, like, I don't want to say, his efficiency's poor or anything, but as you start to get older, right, things go down, but don't sunset that senior guy. You know what? He could be your best marketing tool and bring you 5 times the value of what he could be 100% productive on, because he wants to share his passion with the kids. There's a guy that you send into the local schools, if you can send and spend an hour there with students and talk about the industry. And again, if they had a say an auto program, I don't care if you're a diesel tech, an engine's an engine. You can go in and talk pieces parts with those students for a few hours a day and really, like, just help the schools out some shape form.
Yeah. And even understand what it is that they do need help with. I think that's the power of the relationship. Now, one of the things that has been interesting to me as we've grown the education side of our business is that you will run into teachers from time to time that either don't want those relationships, they don't want the industry relationships, even though they know they need them and that they need them to have a really successful program, but they always like to keep maybe industry at arm's length. Thanks for the support, but we're kind of running this show on our own. And for me, I think there's a level of frustration from the standpoint of, you should, as a teacher, want this help and want industry to help you out. I think the best of the best are, when it comes to education and teachers in general, are the ones that have done a heck of a job networking with industry and have built that backbone of their program that isn't going to allow it to go away. And I worry that those that do kind of keep industry at arm's length are the ones that are going to be the most susceptible. They're going to be the ones that just don't have the support they need should something come to a head where they have to go to a school board meeting and it's on the agenda, and they don't have a whole lot of people wanting to show up on their side of the court, right? And I'm interested to hear if you've ever ran into that experience and trying to work with a school. Obviously, don't give an example, but if you've come across that to where, from an industry standpoint, there's frustration because there's a want to help a certain school out, but it's not reciprocal. They don't want the help, and it drives you nuts.
I've yet to experience somebody being standoffish with us at all.
That's good.
Honestly, in the area, and I cover a large area and stuff all the way to Indiana. Multiple schools where we've tried to work together, and unfortunately, trying to get a high school program at the Indianapolis area with a school district. And it was just unfortunate due to budgetary and transportation constraints where, like, they just couldn't get the kids rounded up enough and get transportation to the training center and carry it on to the local tech school. And it was like, man, we were like right there to the limit, ready to start the new year. And the budget wouldn't be able to afford the transportation side of things. So yeah, those outliers that you don't think of, like, but I've yet to encounter somebody say, no, we're all set here. We don't need your help at all. So it has been good here in this area.
That's great. And I think it's also another valid point in that we have to remember that these schools are run like a business, right? They have a budget. They have to stay within that budget. Sometimes their budgetary practices are a little confusing to me in terms of how they go about it. But we do have to keep that in mind. And when we go in and we're trying to help these schools out, if it's not something that's going to help them move the needle, it might not be as impactful as we think it is. But,
Right.
Anything we can do to draw student interest, that we can do to help support them from a budgetary standpoint. You've done a phenomenal job. You donated a couple of engines to schools that I hauled on a trailer from Dubuque to some of our local schools here. And it was such a cool thing, right? Because it does bring more exposure and really allows those students to see a current day diesel engine, which in itself is a pretty darn cool thing, right? So, it's just, I think we as an industry have to keep that in mind too. Sometimes I struggle with that myself, and truly understanding that, they are trying to appease and please as many people across the community as they can. And as long as the educators have the students' best interest in mind, I'm fine with that. It's when I question that I think I kind of go a different direction.
Yeah, no, I would agree. We've talked a couple. I'm on several advisory boards with local schools in Afar, and even roundtabling stuff, and to the point of, what you think could be a piece of scrap part or something still may be something newer that they have never seen before at the high school level. You know what? It could be half a pickup truck box full of pieces parts, and just take them to the local high school that may have an automotive program, or some kind of program, and like, again, spend an hour or two there and say, hey, I got some stuff I want to drop off, and I'll go over it with you and the students, and then let the instructor take it from there, and then stop back and visit. I think there's so much that can be done, and to your point, like, there's quite a few of us out there trying like crazy to do it, and then there's, if you're hearing it, the resistance from the schools a little bit, which, again, disheartening to hear that a school would give you resistance or say, no, I don't, we're all set here. Is it the pride thing? I don't know if,
as a percentage, it's not a high percentage of schools that are that way. So if I framed it that way, I certainly didn't mean to.
No, I know
there are certainly some, but yeah.
But and that's what it's, I just like Tech when he fixes stuff, right? He hates like heck to have somebody else say, I can't figure it out. It's a pride thing, right? Heck, even myself, I do it, right? I mean, I think we all have that self pride thing. We don't need somebody else to come in and show me how to do this, right? But
yeah, heck, if we need directions to get to our destination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean the phone won't tell me how to get there?
The Google. I've got a question for you. You mentioned advisory committee meetings, and over the years, one of the things that has kind of driven me a little crazy is that it feels like there's a lot of redundancy within advisory committee meetings, and a lot of them could be perceived as checking the box. And I'm trying to maybe just get this out of my head in terms of what makes an advisory committee meeting highly effective. Like, what is it that when you leave an advisory committee meeting, you look back and say, okay, that was a good one. That was a really good one. That was worth my time to come. Because I think in a lot of ways, there are folks in our industry that will go to an advisory committee meeting and be like, well, that was a waste of time. I'm not going back to that. How do we make it so that it's impactful to the school and to the industry and to everybody involved?
I think you're spot on with some of them just checking the boxes, right? Here's my agenda. This is what I have to do. I have to meet these requirements and stuff. The local ones that I attend here are good because they literally break it into a roundtable discussion. They let you voice your opinion. They show you the curriculum, like, and they prompt the questions. They ask the questions. What are you seeing in your shop? So when there's local companies on this advisory board, so from an international dealer to a Freightliner Western Star dealer to a tire, distribution place, what are you seeing from employment? What can we do better? If we've all hired from the school, so what have you seen from the employees that you've gotten from us? Here's our curriculum. What's valid that you're seeing today? Do we steer in this path, or do we just stay in status quo? So those are the ones that I find value because they're truly here to ask our opinions and let us speak our minds and saying, okay, hey, let's not just check mark a box. You need to get away from rebuilding an alternator because nobody tears an alternator apart anymore. They literally diagnose it as failed and they swap the part out. So I get it. Tearing it down, understanding how it functions is one thing, but spending multiple hours on it could be better used somewhere else. Hey, let's try this. We need more electrical type, information to go into their minds.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And having discussion rather than just, hey, we've got to get through all the bullet points. I agree with you. It's far more impactful when it does turn into a discussion on how do we make this school stronger. And I wish there were some times, and I think honestly, I say this, and I do think there are some schools that are really good at this, where, hey, right now enrollment's a concern for us. What can we do to make sure that our enrollment stays up? The next session be focused on, what, we've got a lot of stuff to fit into this little period of time that we're going to have students here. How do we prioritize what curriculum we're going to be
Yep.
giving these students, and really, moving it past just vague conversation to getting really granular on what the actual instruction includes, I think is good. And to the other side, to the industry side, one of the things that I'll say is, don't go to those meetings and just be quiet, right? Like, you're there for a reason. The school thinks something of you to have you there. You need to be prepared and bringing input to these meetings so that we make this program better. And I think one of the things that can get frustrating to me is, this scenario exactly has happened to me several times, where somebody well in the industry who's very boisterous about everything, and then goes into one of those meetings and is as quiet as can be, doesn't say a word. And it might be because they don't want to give away trade secrets. They don't want to give away, anything about their business.
Right.
And I think by kind of sitting on your hands in that conversation, you're not doing the school any good.
Yeah. And those of you that know me, and I know you know me, I'm not afraid to speak up at any point in time at all. So I think sometimes that's why I get invited to as much as I do. So from the DTNA world and a bunch of JAD groups and stuff. And again, I know people have perceived me as like, oh, he's very opinionated. An opinion's just an opinion, but if you didn't want to hear it, you shouldn't have asked, though, right? But I think I'm open enough to agree to disagree at times and stuff. But again, you got to open your mouth. You got to like, hey, I don't know everything, but I'm more than willing to open my mouth and start talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I'm the same way as you. That's why we get along so well, is that I'm not afraid to talk. And honestly, what I've learned over the years is I've tried to limit what I say, not from a standpoint of not trying to bring something to the table, but what I had learned was I was probably talking too much and not allowing other very, very intelligent people in this industry their time to talk and their time to shine. And so it wasn't maybe even necessarily that they didn't want to talk. It was that I wouldn't shut my big trap and allow others to talk. So over the years, I think I've learned to get better and a little bit more disciplined in the feedback that I give. And running an advisory committee meeting is very difficult because you could go in a million different directions every single time, and trying to keep the focus of all these passionate people in a room to be streamlined to what are we trying to fix today is really hard, because it can quickly spiral out of control into a conversation that's not productive to anybody. And it's not at the fault of the instructors or whoever's running the advisory committee meeting. It's just really, really hard to kind of keep it in the lanes. Right. And it is because we have passion and we want to see the program improve. So I think that in itself provides a challenge for a lot of instructors. That's not because of them.
Yep. And you made a good point, Jay. Is typical advisory committee meetings are what, twice a year, spring and fall. And again, it's part of that is, hey, I got to check these boxes, but we're also going to have open conversation. what would it hurt to have smaller mini meetings in between those times and pick one topic and say, hey, look, we're gonna hammer curriculum, and we're gonna do it on a quarterly basis. We're gonna hit curriculum, then we're gonna hit enrollment processes. We're gonna hit employment soft skills, like what do you see and what can we do better here, and then just hammer that stuff out, and then have your two annual, biannual meetings where
I
you're
like that.
you're check marking those boxes, and it could be the big formal one, but keep the other thing too is keep the groups as small as possible. You know yourself, you get 15, 20 people in, you're going to get 15, 20 different opinions, and it goes sideways in a hurry. If you can keep it down to like 6 or 7 people that have passion for and interest in the same lane, let everybody talk, keep it to a minimal, finish it up, move on, go out for a beer afterwards. That's probably when the best conversation meeting happens.
I think you're right. I think it also then becomes an honor to be on the board too, right? Because I think I've been a part of some where it's basically anybody and everybody come on down. We need as much support as we can. And that's great because these schools do need that support, but maybe that support could be better utilized in a different direction. And I love your idea about almost like subcommittees. I know we did that. I was the president of the local chamber of commerce, and that was one of the problems we were having with the chamber, was that we had all these ideas, but the implementation and execution of these ideas wasn't getting done. So our executive director had broken off subcommittees in which folks either had to volunteer or they were volunteered for. And then we tied it to metrics, right? Of, what did your subcommittee do over the course of this year?
Right.
And really be able to have some KPIs for a committee to really answer to. And we found it to be really, really effective, because then you're getting people in their strength zones. I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say, I should not be on a committee to develop curriculum, because that's not my strength. That's not my wheelhouse. But I do feel like I've got a lot of insight on how we get more students into the program. So maybe I could add more value there.
Yep.
And so really taking all of these talented people and getting them into their own lanes that they can really drive progress. Man, that was a light bulb moment for me. That's a really, really good idea.
Yeah. I think that would work best. Yep. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm sitting here thinking like schools and stuff that we've spoken about, kind of, I hate to say it, but year after year. And man, how do you keep this ball moving forward and get more involvement?
How so quantify that, right? Because I think that's one of the things we struggle with as the whole industry is, yes, we need to get more involvement, but how do we know that the pendulum is swinging, that we're actually making progress, and that we're moving in the right direction in any way other than just looking at student enrollment year over year, right? Like how do we know that our industry involvement is actually making an impact?
And I'm trying to keep my ear to the wall with, I believe it's the Bureau of Labor stats. And
Yep.
you start pulling up those stats like that. Now, I was recently a keynote speaker at Ohio Technical College, and Bruce, I believe, spoke about the diesel/skilled trades had a 27% increase recently in employment, I believe. And I got to get the article from him, so I don't quote me for that. But it was like, that's an impressive number if that's the case. Like, whether it's employment and or enrollment, either or, 27% increase can quantify that
Doing something right.
something's happening, right? I mean, we're doing something right.
Yeah, I think that's a good metric to look at. Sometimes I think with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it might be a little bit of a trailing type of stat. Might take a little bit of time to get it out there. So maybe it's not as real time as we'd like, but at least there's something to point to, right? And I know we're working on some different stuff along those lines and trying to bring more visibility to that. But I think at times maybe that's where it can feel a little redundant, is if we're having the same conversation year over year and
Yeah.
we don't have something to point to and say, hey, we're making progress, you know.
Yep.
And I think that's a great point, that it just, you know, there are some key metrics out there, but it would be a little nicer to have them defined a little clearer, so we as an industry know if we're moving in the right direction.
Well, and again, hats off to you, because I know you do a lot of surveys with the technician side of things. You guys in Full Bay and stuff. I think, you know, as much as companies like yourself can get that information or questions right and get the information back, I think there's as much real time as you can get. And again, you guys do a really great job at that, Jay. So
Thank
that
you.
that helps us understand. You know, you're not afraid to pull the punches and ask the questions to the techs that we, the businesses, need to know for sure. And you know
Yeah.
what? Being a third party like that, you know, I think they speak and they're more honest of their opinions.
Yeah, I think because there's not the ramifications, right?
Right,
We take it
exactly.
very seriously that we're not going to share their information. You'd be shocked at the amount of companies that reach out asking to buy our database,
Yeah,
we just say, you know, that we protect that, and that, because it's important. Because if you give that away at some point, nobody's ever going to trust you, right?
yeah,
So I think it's a matter of, like, I think as we've built the company, we've built that reputation. I think that is really, really important, that you're going to do with their information what you say you're going to do with that information. And, you know, for us to be able to help at least point some education back to the shops and be able to say, okay, like, there's some of this that we need to be looking in the mirror. And again, it seems so easy just to, you know, hey, what do you want? Well, I want this. Okay. And then be able to adjust and adapt. But that's not the case, because there's so many players at stake, and there's so many moving parts to this. And for us to just, you know, not just us, but like the entire industry, to continue to have that desire to want to know what we need to change to make it more appealing. And going back to the start of our conversation, so that when we walk into a school and we have a conversation with students, that we can be really, really confident with what we're saying, and that we're not trying to sell something that's not true, or
right.
sell something that's not, you know, that's not realistic. You know, I just think there's so much more we can do as an industry to really paint a clear picture of what this industry has to offer, show them what that lifestyle looks like, and know that, you know what, we're all really proud of this industry, because it's given us all a lot, and it wouldn't have happened without that technical background to start with. And just because you're starting as a tech doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stay as a technician. I mean, how many technicians do we know that aren't currently technicians, right? Like
Right.
that had moved on. And so, and then the vice versa, there's so many extremely skilled technicians that elected to keep doing it and are just at a whole different level now. And those folks make me extremely proud as well, because they're doing it day in and day out. And they're just, they're the leaders of this whole thing. Those ones that are in the shops and doing it every day.
I hear a reality show coming for you next. You can be the host of a reality show, Life and Times of a Diesel Technician. There's your next big project for WrenchWay. You just got to get with the Discovery Channel.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I think it is cool though, like, because it just, in that sense, not the reality show part, because I don't know that I'm reality show material. I'd be probably canceled within the first couple of weeks. But being able to share those stories of those really good, experienced technicians, you know, from every shop standpoint, the
Yeah.
more you can tell those stories, the more you can really kind of live life through their lens a little bit, and see the good, and honestly even some of the bad. Like, I don't care what job you go into, there's going to be some negative to it. So yeah, just being able to see reality of what this thing is, I think is hugely, hugely impactful. All right, Ray, I just want to say thank you for being on the show, and tell you how much you mean to the industry, how much you've meant to us as a company. It's an absolute pleasure to have you back on, and look forward to the next time. That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.